The rain came down hard that night, like the sky itself was angry. Each drop hit the cracked bar window with a sound that made people glance up, uneasy. Inside, the low hum of country music and chatter filled the smoky air, until the door opened. Two tall black men stepped in, their boots wet, coats dripping. The sound of their footsteps cut through the room like a sermon cutting through sin. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Even the jukebox seemed to lower its volume. Everyone stared, not because they recognized them, but because in this small, suspicious town, two confident black strangers walking into a mostly white bar after dark wasn't just unusual, it was a warning bell. Marcus and Malik exchanged a quiet glance, the kind brothers share without words. They'd been through tougher rooms than this. Desert heat. Ocean storms. Enemy fire. But somehow, this room, with its stale beer and sideways stares, felt colder than any battlefield. They walked to the counter. The bartender, a man with a red face and a smirk that told more truth than words, leaned forward. Marcus smiled politely, voice calm. 2 coffees, please. Strong. The bartender blinked, confused. Then a grin slid across his face. Coffee? At a bar? He laughed, turning to the men beside him. You hear that? They want coffee. The men chuckled, low and mean. Sorry, the bartender said. We don't serve coffee after 9. You can try something stronger, if you can pay for it. The room laughed again. But this time, it wasn't humor, it was something darker. Malik's eyes scanned the bar. He saw it in every face. The judgment. The fear. The hostility hiding behind laughter. The kind of look that said, you don't belong here. Marcus stayed silent, his jaw tightening. It's fine, he said softly. Forget it. But the bartender wasn't done. Where you two from anyway? Don't look like locals. One of the men at the table spoke up, slurring his words. Probably passing through. You know the type. He spat into a cup. Acting like they own the place. Before Marcus could reply, the door opened again, and 2 police officers stepped in, shaking off the rain. The crowd relaxed, as if backup had arrived. These were the town regulars, Officers Carter and Doyle. Men everyone knew. Men who didn't like surprises. Their eyes landed immediately on the twins. Carter grinned. Evenin', boys, he said, his tone stretching the word boys like an insult. His hand rested casually on his holster. You fellas lost? Malik stood a little straighter. No, sir. Just waiting for our order. Doyle took a step forward. His breath smelled like beer. His eyes like trouble. Order, huh? You got ID on you. Marcus frowned. For what reason? Because I said so. Doyle's tone sharpened, cutting through the air. The bar went silent again. Someone whispered, Why? They didn't do anything. Doyle turned toward the voice. Because they look like trouble. Marcus's hands clenched at his sides. He stared at the officer, his expression calm but heavy with quiet power. There was something in his eyes, discipline, control, years of leadership, that made the officer hesitate. For a second. Then he shoved Marcus backward against the counter. Bottles clinked. One fell and shattered. The sound made everyone jump. Malik stepped forward instantly. Don't touch him. Doyle turned, his face redder now. What did you say? Malik's voice didn't rise. I said, don't touch my brother. The tension cracked like a whip. Chairs scraped. The bartender froze mid-pour. It was no longer a bar scene, it was a standoff. Marcus straightened slowly, his breathing controlled, his face unreadable. But inside, a storm was building. Doyle sneered. You threatening an officer? No, Marcus said quietly. But you're making a mistake. Big words. Doyle smirked. You think you're special, huh? Marcus didn't answer. Malik's hand trembled slightly at his side. He could feel it, the rage, the humiliation, the weight of being disrespected in the country they'd risked their lives to protect. But they stayed still. Because that's what soldiers do. They don't explode. They endure. Carter took a step closer, joining in. You two got some kind of problem tonight? Marcus looked him dead in the eye. "No, sir. But it looks like you do." The words hit harder than a punch. The room went deathly quiet. Doyle's face twisted with anger. "That's it," he said, grabbing Marcus by the arm again. Malik moved before he could think. "Don't." The officer's hand shot to his cuffs. "Resisting arrest, huh?" "Arrest?" the bartender blurted nervously. "For what?" "They didn't." "Stay out of it." Doyle snapped. The tension in the room thickened until even the rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Malik stepped forward again, his voice now deep, sharp, commanding. "Officer, release him." No. It wasn't a plea. It was an order. One that came from years of giving commands under fire. But Doyle only laughed. "Oh, we got a tough guy here. What are you, some kind of soldier?" Malik said nothing. Just stared. The silence that followed was so intense it hurt. The kind of silence that made you realize you just disrespected the wrong man. But Doyle didn't see it. He pushed Malik back. Hard. Malik stumbled, crashing into a table. The bar gasped. Something in Marcus snapped. His voice boomed, sharp, loud, trained. "That's enough." The entire room froze. The voice wasn't from the streets. It was from somewhere higher, somewhere disciplined, deadly. But Doyle didn't hear it that way. He yanked Marcus forward, forcing his arms behind him. "You're under arrest," he spat. "For what?" Someone shouted again, but no one dared move. Malik, nose bleeding, lifted his head slowly. "You really want to do this?" he said, eyes cold, controlled. "You're making a mistake you can't walk back." Doyle smirked. "Is that a threat?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "That's a warning." And with that, the cuffs clicked. Cold metal on skin. The sound echoed in every corner of the room. The officers marched them out through the door. Rain hit their faces, but neither man flinched. The red and blue lights painted their uniforms of shame. As they were pushed into the back of the patrol car, Doyle muttered under his breath, "Funny. You two act like you're somebody." Marcus met his eyes through the rearview mirror, his voice steady, haunting. "We are." The officer laughed, starting the engine. But the sound of those two words hung in the air long after the car drove away. Inside the bar, no one spoke. The woman who had whispered before wiped a tear from her eye. The bartender shook his head slowly. He didn't know who those men were. But something about the way they carried themselves, silent, dignified, unbroken, told him this story wasn't over. And outside, in the rain, somewhere between injustice and destiny, two brothers sat in the back of a police car, knowing that the world was about to find out exactly who they were. The police car's tires hissed against the wet asphalt, red and blue lights flashing across the narrow street. Inside, the twins sat silent. Malik's nose still bled, a small crimson line tracing down to his lip. Marcus stared straight ahead, his wrists locked in steel, breathing steady. You could almost hear his thoughts in that silence. Not anger, not fear, but disappointment. The kind that sits deep in your chest when you've seen too much of the same story play out again and again. In the front seat, Officer Doyle was grinning. "Look at him," he muttered. "Big and bad in the bar, quiet now." Carter laughed under his breath. "Yeah, I bet they've got records a mile long. Trouble always comes dressed nice." Doyle glanced at the mirror, locking eyes with Marcus. "You gonna stare at me, boy?" Marcus didn't respond. His eyes didn't move. His stillness said more than any words could. The car turned sharply into the station parking lot, stopping hard enough to throw the twins forward. Malik took a slow breath, fighting to keep his calm. Every instinct screamed to react, to defend, to fight back. But years of service had taught him control, and tonight, that control was his only weapon. Inside the small-town police station, the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. The air smelled of stale coffee and damp paper. Doyle pushed Marcus forward. "Sit. Don't move." Malik followed quietly, his boots squeaking on the linoleum floor. One of the clerks, a young woman behind the desk, frowned. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "Bar fight." Doyle laughed. "Nah. Couple of tough guys thinkin' they own the place." We fixed that. The woman looked uneasy. They don't look like trouble. Don't worry, Doyle said, dropping their IDs on the counter. We'll find something. Marcus lifted his head. You don't need to find something that isn't there. Doyle turned sharply. What was that? Marcus didn't flinch. I said you're making a mistake. Carter stepped closer, puffing out his chest. You think you're some kind of big shot? Maybe you forgot who's in charge here. Malik's calm voice broke through the tension. Men like you always think control comes from power. He paused. It doesn't. Doyle chuckled, a low bitter laugh. Oh yeah. Then where's it come from? Malik met his gaze. Discipline. Respect. And right now you have none. That shut the room up for a second. Just a second. Then Doyle reached for his baton, tapping it against the desk like a warning. Careful, soldier boy. You're a long way from wherever you think you matter. The word soldier slipped out by accident, and Doyle didn't even notice it. But Marcus did. So did Malik. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, a silent understanding. Not yet. Carter moved to start the paperwork. Full names. Birth dates. Height. Weight. His voice was bored, detached. Malik spoke softly. Malik Hayes. Carter paused, scribbling it down, unaware of what that name really meant. He looked up at Marcus. And you? Marcus Hayes. Brothers. Twins, Marcus said. Carter nodded and went back to his form. Figures. Same attitude. The young clerk looked uncomfortable now. Her pen trembled slightly. Something about their tone, their poise, it didn't fit the picture Doyle was painting. What exactly did they do? She asked again. Disorderly conduct, Doyle barked. Marcus let out a dry laugh under his breath. It wasn't humor, it was disbelief. Malik turned toward him, quiet, watchful. Doyle frowned. Something funny. Marcus's eyes met his. Just wondering how many times you've used that line to cover your pride. That made Doyle snap. He stepped forward, hand gripping Marcus's collar. You got a smart mouth. Marcus's voice dropped lower. And you've got a short fuse. That's a bad mix for a man with a gun. The whole room froze. Even Carter looked uneasy now. Hey, Doyle, he muttered. Maybe just let the sergeant handle this one. But Doyle's pride was louder than reason. No. These two think they're better than us. Malik's voice rose then, deep and steady. No, officer. We think we're equal. That one word, equal, echoed through the small station. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It just hung there, like truth nobody wanted to touch. Doyle shoved Marcus back into the chair and stormed off to the corner, pacing. Malik leaned against the wall, breathing slow. His nose had stopped bleeding, but the dried blood still marked his skin. He didn't wipe it away. He wanted them to see it, what injustice looked like up close. Minutes dragged. The hum of the lights mixed with the sound of rain still hammering the roof. Marcus stared at his hands. Calloused. Strong. Hands that had held weapons, saved lives, saluted flags. Hands now cuffed for being the wrong color in the wrong place. Finally, Carter sighed, setting his pen down. Look, this doesn't have to get worse. Just tell us what really happened in there. Marcus looked up slowly. You want the truth? Carter nodded. The truth, Marcus said, is that two tired men came home from serving their country and stopped for coffee. His voice was calm, low, deliberate. And for that, they were called suspicious. They were shoved, humiliated, arrested. Carter looked down. Maybe we just misunderstood. No, Malik said quietly. You didn't misunderstand. You assumed. The words landed hard. The clerk swallowed. Even Doyle stopped pacing for a moment. Malik continued, voice soft but cutting. You didn't see two men. You saw two threats. Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. Doyle turned toward them. Save your speeches. You'll spend the night in a cell. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at Malik. The brothers didn't speak, but their eyes did. Let them. Outside, thunder cracked. The storm hadn't ended, it was building. Just like this one. As Doyle led them down the hall, Carter hesitated, watching the twins disappear into the holding area. Something in his gut twisted. "Hey, Doyle," he called. "What if we did get this wrong?" Doyle didn't even look back. "We didn't." But Carter wasn't so sure anymore. Because when Marcus turned just before the cell door closed, there was no fear in his face. Just calm. The kind of calm a man has when he knows something the rest of the room doesn't. And as the lock clicked shut, Malik said quietly, "You really want to do this? You're making a mistake you can't walk back." Doyle smirked. "Is that a threat?" Marcus's eyes flickered in the dim light. "No," he said, voice soft as thunder before lightning strikes. "That's a warning." The cell door closed. The echo rang through the hall long after the storm outside faded. And though the officers didn't know it yet, the warning had already begun. The air inside Raven's bar froze. Every sound, every breath, seemed suspended in disbelief. Malik's chest rose slowly as he stood. The bar's neon lights flickered off the gold trim of the small badge he'd quietly placed on the counter. For a moment, no one understood what they were seeing. Then silence turned into confusion. Officer Daniels blinked, his smug smile fading. "What's this supposed to be?" he scoffed, stepping forward. Malik didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket, calm but commanding, and unfolded his military ID. His voice was low but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "I'm Captain Malik Carter, U.S. Army Special Forces." The bar went still again. The officers exchanged quick, uneasy glances. The crowd that had gathered, mostly the same faces that had cheered the officers on, now stared in uncomfortable quiet. But Malik wasn't finished. "And this," he said, turning his eyes toward his younger brother, "is Commander Marcus Carter, United States Navy SEALs." Marcus, who had been trembling moments before, finally stood tall. His voice carried a quiet strength now. "You pulled a gun on a Navy SEAL commander," he said slowly. "Because we had a drink in our own hometown." The words landed heavy. Officer Reed's hand, still gripping his holster, began to shake. Daniels took a step back. "Wait, there's gotta be some mistake." "No mistake," Marcus interrupted, pulling out his identification too. "We've both served this country longer than you've worn that badge." The emotional shift was seismic. The same men who had barked orders a minute ago now looked small, caught between shame and fear. The crowd whispered in disbelief. Someone muttered, "They're soldiers," another voice added, "real heroes." And suddenly, the balance of power flipped. Malik walked forward, slow, deliberate, eyes locked on the officers. "You see these uniforms," he said softly, "and you forget that before the rank, before the medals, we're just men. Black men. And to you, that's all that mattered." Officer Daniels swallowed hard. The arrogance had drained from his face. "Look, we didn't know, all right? Things just got tense." "Tense," Malik repeated, almost whispering. His tone was icy calm. "You pulled a weapon. You called for backup. You tried to humiliate us." He stepped closer, until he was face to face with a man who had threatened his brother. "Would you have done that if we looked like you?" No one spoke. Not even the bartender dared to breathe. For the first time that night, it was the officers who felt small, trapped under the weight of their own reflection. Marcus placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, grounding him. "Let it go, bro," he said softly. "We already won." Malik looked around at the silent faces, people who now saw the truth that had been invisible moments ago. He nodded slowly, his voice steady and full of quiet fire. "No, we all lost," he said. "Because this isn't just about us. It's about what happens when a badge stops meaning protection and starts meaning permission." The officers stood frozen, ashamed, as Malik turned away. The once hostile crowd now parted like a sea, letting the brothers walk through, not as victims, but as men reclaimed. Outside, the night air was cold, but freeing. Marcus exhaled deeply, a half-smile breaking through. "You really dropped the captain card, huh?" Malik smiled faintly, eyes on the dark horizon. "Nah," he said. "I dropped the truth." The night had quieted. The chaos inside Raven's bar was replaced by a heavy, uneasy silence that seemed to linger long after the brothers left. Inside, people sat in stunned reflection. No music, no chatter, just the echo of what had happened. Outside, Malik and Marcus walked slowly down the empty street. The streetlights painted soft halos on the pavement as if trying to cleanse the darkness that had just unfolded. Neither spoke for a long time. The sound of their boots on the sidewalk was the only rhythm between them. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "You think they learned anything tonight?" he asked, voice low, uncertain. Malik's eyes stayed ahead. "Maybe," he said. "But the truth is, it shouldn't take a title to earn respect. No one should have to wear a uniform to be treated like a human being." Marcus nodded slowly, the words sinking deep. "Crazy part," he said, shaking his head. "We've been in war zones safer than that bar." Malik gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "That's the America we're still fighting for, little brother. Not the one in foreign lands, but the one right here." Back at the bar, Officer Daniels sat alone in the corner booth, his face buried in his hands. The weight of guilt pressed heavy. The crowd had long dispersed, but his conscience didn't. He replayed every word Malik said, every arrogant smirk, every assumption. For the first time, he saw himself, not as a law enforcer, but as a man who failed his own oath. Reed walked up quietly. "You good?" he asked, uncertain. Daniels looked up, eyes red. "No," he said honestly. "I thought I knew what justice looked like, but I didn't even recognize it when it was standing in front of me." He looked toward the door, where the brothers had left moments ago, and whispered, "I owe them an apology, and maybe more than that." Across town, Malik and Marcus stopped by the riverfront, the same place they used to come as kids whenever life felt too heavy. The wind carried the faint scent of salt and old bridges. Malik stared out at the dark water. "You know, I used to think rank could protect us," he said quietly. "That once we made it high enough, people would see the person, not the color." Marcus looked at him, eyes soft with pain and wisdom. "But they didn't," he said. Malik nodded. "No, they didn't." He sighed deeply. "But that's okay. Because now they saw something else. Dignity. Not power. Dignity." A long silence followed. The kind of silence that isn't empty, it's full. Full of lessons, of anger, of pride, of healing. Then Malik turned to Marcus and said something that felt like a closing prayer. "You can strip a man of his job, his money, even his name. But if he still walks with dignity, he can't be broken. That's the only uniform that never fades." Marcus smiled faintly. "Guess we're still in service, huh?" Malik chuckled softly, nodding. "Yeah. Just a different kind of mission now." As dawn began to creep across the horizon, the brothers walked away from the river, two shadows blending into the early light, not soldiers of war this time, but soldiers of truth. Moral lesson: true respect isn't earned through titles, ranks, or badges. It's born from recognizing the humanity in others, no matter their color, clothing, or circumstance. Because real honor doesn't come from power. It comes from empathy. And in a world divided by fear and pride, sometimes it takes a moment of injustice to remind us that respect has no uniform.